Hello, everybody. Welcome to Energetic Conversations. It's good to be back with you all. Just waiting for Maya to join, and then we will get started. We're talking about reclaiming our ancestral lineages today, our ancestral practices, all of the things, other things. So we're just really looking forward to just getting into this. And like I said, I'm just waiting for Maya to come on, and then we'll bring her in and we'll talk about all the things of the things. We were off for a couple of weeks. I had COVID. It was rough. It was rough. So we put things on hold for a couple of weeks. But yeah, we're back at it. And Maya's just joined, so I'm gonna bring her in now. There we go.
Hello.
There you are. How are you?
Hi. I'm okay, thank you. I'm working through a few energies this morning, but it's all good.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. I feel like I'm very close to the camera. It's good to see you.
How are
You look
you?
beautiful.
Oh, thank you. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I was just saying to everyone, obviously I had COVID over the past couple of weeks, so we had like postponed things. But yeah, I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Just working through, again, different energies, recovering, getting my strength back from the sickness and everything like that. But I'm doing well.
Good. I think we're
Yeah.
both getting there, so
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So today's all about reclamation work, reclaiming our ancestral lineages, practices, and just reconnecting to who we are. I think particularly as Black and Brown people, but I think this is for everyone.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's what we're doing today. What does that mean for you? Like in terms of, reclamation work and reclaiming your ancestry in general.
For me, I feel like because through colonization and the racism that is deeply embedded in colonization, there's so much shame that's been piled on Black and Brown people particularly. And for me, that shame I've carried my entire life, and it's been put onto me by other people as well. So reclamation work is removing the shame, because I feel like the shame is a block to actually healing. So yeah, it's removing the shame, and then like embracing certain parts of my heritage that I had not embraced. So for example, wearing this chanlo, which is also known as a bindi, and just wearing like Indian things and embracing that side of myself that I was like taught to put into the shadow, taught to deny, taught to suppress, for putting like whiteness first and prioritizing whiteness and code switching and learning. I wouldn't have this accent if colonization wasn't a thing. Like I wouldn't be speaking English. We wouldn't be speaking English. So it's like reclaiming all of those things. And there's a lot. Like every time you think you've got there, it's like there's just so many more things. And our cultures are so rich, So like, I mean, the Indian culture, I mean, we all know like how like I think I could spend the rest of my life learning about and reclaiming my roots and still never actually reach that stage of like knowing everything because of the rich heritage, which I'm proud of. So yeah, in a
Definitely.
nutshell, that's like kind of what it means to me.
I love it. I love it. And yeah, and it's been great to see you on your journey of reclaiming your ancestry. And honestly, you just seeing you come more alive, throughout the years that I've known you. And it's just been a beautiful, beautiful trajectory that you've been on, and long may it continue, and I feel similarly, I think for me, it's reconnecting to the different African cultures that I'm a part of, that are from my ancestral lines. And I think also too, just in general as well, even if I'm not directly connected to them. So, in my lineage, I have both East African and West African heritage. And, it's finding that out. And I think the African, I think being Black in the Western world, it's a slightly different, being African American and British Caribbean, it's a slightly different vantage point than if I had been born and raised in Africa my entire life. Because at some point, your ancestral line, at least on paper, just goes blank. I mean, it literally, I mean, I can trace my family back 3 generations, and then there's just nothing, like literally nothing. And I think for the Black community, for many of the Black community, there's this identity crisis in some way, because you're trying to find out who you are. You're in lands that don't really accept you, that abuse you constantly, that are constantly reminding you that you don't belong or that you're not wanted here, being exploited. The list goes on and on. And then, you know, even if I went back to mainland Africa tomorrow, I would be seen as a tourist, as a visitor, as an outsider. To many, not all, to many. And so it's one of those things where you feel like you are part of many lands, but also have no land at the same time. And I think what that does is create this type of fragmentation of who we are, and it's sometimes hard to ground. And then so it's, you know, from that vantage point, when we speak about reclaiming our ancestry, I think for a lot of Black people, they'd be like, what ancestry? I think you have to go even farther back than that. Like for most people, it's like, well, what do I reclaim? Where am I even from? You know, like, and I think there's so much that has been stolen from us, you know, due to European interference, oppression, the transatlantic slave trade, colonization, and the host of other abuses and exploitations that, you know, that we've experienced. So that is tough. That is challenging. But at 32 years old, I've really been doing a lot of work in finding out more about who I am, who my family is, you know, and where we come from, you know, and that's such a big piece of work that I've been doing. And I would say, you know, my brother's been doing a lot of work on that. One of my aunts, my Aunt Rachel, she's been doing some great work at that. You know, different cousins and, you know, my siblings, we've all been kind of doing a family effort on that and like taking different parts of it. So the next stage for me is to do a DNA test with African ancestry, so I can find out what tribe my bloodline is related to and what modern day country in Africa I have connections with. And then it's going to start to then unpack that and research what, you know, those spaces. So yeah, that's kind of like where I'm at in terms of like finding out like kind of the more practical things. But even without knowing that, I've been intentional about reclaiming certain African practices, ancestral practices. I know that I have Ghanaian ancestry. I know I have Nigerian ancestry. I know I have Ethiopian ancestry. So it's like starting with what you have. You know, you may not know all the ins and outs. You may not know what tribe of, you know, from those places, those modern day places, because obviously those are not the original names of those places. But, you know, I have bits of information. So with the bits that I have, I'm working with what I got, you know.
As you're speaking, it makes me think of shamanism, because it's like, you know, when an individual goes through a shamanic journey and you pull the soul fragments back to you, you kind of journey through the underworld and you reclaim those fragments. I feel like, you know, when you were talking about, you know, you go 3 generations back and then there's just nothing. It feels like that kind of like collective shamanic work to like pull that fragment back, you know, it's not kind of gone completely. It's in the shadow because it can't go. It's not like it actually just disappeared. It's there, but it was put into the shadow by this dominant group of people that obviously wanted to usurp, destroy, control your people. But it's not gone. And it just made me think of that. It was like, actually that's like shamanic work, but on this like greater scale. And to a certain degree, we're all doing it, but I think it's especially poignant for you and people who are from a similar background, where you go 3 generations back and there's nothing tangible. Yeah,
definitely. And thank you for that reminder. And that just lands so well with me, you know, and thank you for that. So yeah, I think, you know, when I look at myself and when I look at, I think other Black and brown people, I think one of the things that I think is one of the most poignant and integral and vital things to connect with and reclaim is our spirituality, you know. And I think that, you know, because, and that, I think, you know, the last conversation we did have was about religious abuse. And I mean, that is something that is so, we have not been the same since that conversation. but and you know, in the response we've had from that, you know, so many people reaching out and saying how it's connected with them and resonated with them. And I think because again, it is such an, look, all abuse is bad, but I think if you can really start with like working through your religious and spiritual abuse, you'll be cooking with gas. You really will be cooking with gas.
Yeah.
You know, like, and again, you'll have a host of other abuses to start working through. But if you can free your soul, you're cooking with some good gas.
That's it, because spiritual abuse is abuse of the soul and the spirit, and that's like the deepest level of abuse, because we're dealing with life and death, heaven and hell, morality, like, you know, and it kind of embeds itself then in every other aspect of our life. So I agree with you completely. If we can work with that, we're cooking on gas. And for anyone who hasn't heard our conversation about religious abuse, please do listen into it, because that's a good place to kind of start thinking about that. But yeah, I hear you. And you know, that part that you said about a few minutes ago about, you know, not feeling in a way like I'm paraphrasing, but like feeling like you don't really belong anywhere. Because I know when I went back to, I mean, I don't necessarily feel like I belong in England, obviously. But I don't feel like I belong in India. Because when I have gone to India, I mean, I don't know how to speak the language properly. I understand it, but I don't actually know how to speak it. I don't know how to cook like half the things. Like I don't have the inflections and the mannerisms and like all of that stuff. And it's like, people have looked at me like, like I don't quite get you. And yeah, it's a really weird thing. And I think part of reclaiming our cultural heritage, ancestral heritage, is finding a place of belonging within ourselves as well, because we're never really going to find it in a physical place, because it's too late in a way. I don't mean to sound, it's not to sound cynical, it's just realistic, you know. Yeah, we could go back to Africa and India and like live there, and or Jamaica, or, you know, like we could, but there would always be a piece of us that wouldn't truly feel like we fit in until we really did the inner work where we felt we belonged within ourselves, you know. And I think that's what colonialism did. It kind of irrevocably changed the energetic imprint of us as people, as a collective, if that makes sense. So it's like, yeah, it's that shamanism work of like bringing that back, but also finding a new way to exist energetically now that we can't go back, you know. And sometimes thinking, well, would I want to? You know, there's great parts of it, but then it's like, well, we're here now and there's great things now. Can we combine that with our ancestral heritage and create something new? You know, seeing as we're now in this space. So I feel like that's where a lot of us are at, like grieving what we won't get back, and then welcoming what is good. What might be better about our lives now than our ancestors had.
Definitely. Beautifully said, you know, and I love that, you know, finding the gold in the despair, you know. It's like, what can we create? What are the opportunities that are in the adversity, you know, that have been created? And so that's for us to find out. And like you said, it's the inner work. It doesn't, on some level, yes, you know, it's great for people to have a land. That is a beautiful thing. And I think it's necessary in many different ways. But again, it's like, I think where we're moving into is exactly what you said. It's like, you know, we are our lands. You know, we have to become our lands, you know, and it is about that inner work. And so wherever we go, we have to be able to feel at home where we are, you know, and we will be creating new lands and new tribes and new villages, you know, and sacred villages, you know, which is something Maya and I are in the process of creating right now. You know, and so I think it is that. And I think perhaps the reclamation work is really finding, okay, what are the things, you know, what are the cultural practices and the ancestral practices that we should bring forth with us now, that help to ground us, that help to connect us, that can really help be a beacon for us as we move forward, and leaving what else doesn't resonate, you know, because to think that everything was perfect back then is a false reality as well. You know, again, having no knowledge of your past is terrible, but also having a romanticized version of your past is also not a good thing either. So that's why I'm always big on people get to know, find out where you're from, you know, even if it's just a general idea, and read, learn, watch, listen, find out about the practices, find out about the people, what they ate, all the different things are the things, the good, the bad, and everything in between. You should want to know all of it, you know?
Yeah.
You should want to know all of it. And you don't have to carry any guilt or shame with that. And I think that's one thing that we, particularly as Black and brown people living in the West, sometimes carry with us, is this guilt and shame of who we are and where we come from, and the state of the countries that we come from and where they're at now. And it's kind of like we almost feel this way of like, you know, a lot of the countries that we come from, yeah, a lot of them, again, are in poverty, like at least large parts of them may be in poverty. They may not have the best political systems. They may not have the best healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. And so we sometimes feel guilty of being from there, but recognize that a very large part of that is because of colonization and because of the transatlantic slave trade. So you should never feel guilty about being who you are, or being ashamed of where you come from. Don't allow this Western white world to make you feel that way. And so I just want to share that as well.
Yeah, thank you. And I completely agree. And one of the things that came up for me when you were talking is, you know, there are some things that we have to embrace, and some things we can kind of like take or leave. And one of the things that I know that we have to embrace in a way is the way that we look, because that's something that like we can't really choose. You know, it's something that is so apparent, so there, so visible. We can't run away from that, you know, and it is our ancestral heritage. Like, you know, I look at me, I look at you, this is our ancestry. Like, we are a culmination of all of our ancestors in one person. And one of the ways in which I've been reclaiming my ancestry is literally just learning to love the way that I look again, because of the shame that was placed upon us, you know, because so much shame has been placed upon the way that we look, because we're not white, basically. So like anything that divests from what whiteness is, like, you know, color of our skin, the texture of our hair, the shape of our noses, the shape of our like mouths or facial features, that was deemed as not acceptable and ugly and disgusting or it felt like that's what was being put on us. Obviously, it's a delusion, complete delusion, that was fabricated and deliberate to make us feel horrible about ourselves. But I feel like that's one really, really powerful thing. I know for me, especially as a woman with misogyny that's been kind of overlaid into that as well. It's like, because as a woman, you know, like you are brought up to feel like everything you do and everything you look like is literally for men to love you. You know, that's the whole point. And so as a brown woman, as a Black woman, not that I can speak for Black women, but I can imagine that, you know, there are parts of deep shame that's been conditioned in to us around that. And so for me, it's like literally things like, you know, saving phone, like on my phone, like the home screen, pictures of women with larger noses, so that I literally normalize it in my mind. I look at it every single day when I wake up, when I'm on my phone, which is all the time. And it's like, even if it's not conscious, it's subconsciously like going in every time. And it reverses like all the times when I was looking out on the playground and everyone was fucking white, you know, and I was looking out at all my friends and everyone was white. And like, then I looked in the mirror and I just got this horrible shock, because I was like, oh, you know, like, what is this? You know, what is this nose? And, you know, it makes me so angry. Like that to me feels similar to spiritual and religious abuse in a sense, because it's who we physically are. It's how we manifest in this world. And like, it's how you walk down the street. It's how you physically show your face to someone. It's so deep. Like it's so deeply part of our identity. And it's damaging. It's so damaging. So I feel like that's one thing that is almost non-negotiable for Black and brown people, to learn to love the way that we look, because that's not something that we can change, you know.
Definitely, 100%. So well said. So well said. Apologies if I'm a little delayed. It's been breaking up for a little bit. I think my internet connection has just been really weird this whole week. I know you and I have been trying to speak on Zoom calls and stuff. So if I am like a little delayed, just apologies. But but yeah, no, 100%, you know, and I just, you know, it saddens me about how much we have internalized the abuse of how we physically look as Black and brown people living in this Western world, you know, with colorism, you know, being so prevalent, you know, skin bleaching being so I think skin bleaching is probably more prevalent now than it's ever been. And, you know,
Yeah.
and it's crazy. It's almost like it's going backwards in a way, you know,
Yeah.
it's like, and I think social media plays a part of that. You know, obviously media and just in general plays a part of that. You know, and so again, our physical features are so important to who we are. You know, and how we exist in this world, as you said. So again, it is about embracing that. And you know, I want to share as well. You know, and you know, and it's interesting as well. Before I say that, it's been really interesting doing work with men in the past and being at an intersection of various groups of men. So, you know, you know, working with Black men in the room as, you know, as South Asian men and in the room with white men. But if I just speak about Black and South Asian men, you know, one of the things that I heard from some of my South Asian colleagues and friends and people who I've worked with, and again, I can't speak for the whole South Asian male community. I'm only going to speak for the ones that I've spoken to. But just this feeling of not feeling attractive, you know, and for me, I was like, oh, like, you know, I think South Asian people and men are very attractive, but you know, it's like for them, listening to them is like, you know, they don't feel like they're attractive. And then hearing from some of them that like there's one of the resentments they had towards Black men is that the world somehow found us attractive, or like, I guess maybe white women found us attractive or more attractive than they found them. And I was like, that's interesting. And thank you for sharing. No, I said that with them. Thank you for sharing that. And I was like, cool. And I think a lot of Black men, because a lot of Black men are very unaware in which they feel inferior to white people and the ways in which they have been fetishized, you know, and like I think a lot of Black men see fetishization as acceptance, you know, and I think there are a lot of Black men in relationships with white people who are actually being fetishized right now in all reality, you know, and but because of and again, I think there are many Black men who aren't conscious of this or who may not admit it to themselves, but because of their own like levels of self-worth and racialized self-worth, you know, they accept this like this, you know, this kind of like attention from white women or white people or whoever as love and affection and like validation. And I think that's one of the reasons why we do see so many Black men with white women. You know, it's almost trying to feed that part of yourself that like, no, I am attractive, I am good looking, you know, and particularly when you see a lot of like dark skinned men with either light skinned Black women or white women. And it's like, it's almost, you can read it like a book. It's like, you don't like the color of your own skin. So then therefore you're going to project that onto every other woman or every other romantic partner you have, because you don't like the color of your own skin. And for many of these men, they wouldn't be caught dead with a woman or a partner with the same skin color as them. You know, and they don't see that as, it's like, that's your own projection of how you feel about yourself that you're then projecting. And I see that a lot within the Black community, you know, with men particularly. And it's interesting because again, it comes from a racialized viewpoint of like how we look, that then gets distorted and like being hypersexualized and fetishized, and then playing into that because that is the validation that you're going to get from this group of people who on one level you say you don't give a fuck about, but then on another level you're constantly doing these things that show that you are just so much tied to white ideologies and like just very unaware of it, if that makes sense.
Complete sense. It's Stockholm Syndrome, isn't it? It's like you fall in love with your captor and like, you know that what your captor has done is evil and blah, blah, cruel, but it's like something in you just wants that approval and that love. And I say this because everything you've said about Black men, that's literally how I have felt, like, as in, like every person I've been in a serious long-term relationship with up until this point has been lighter skinned than me. So I've had 4 serious relationships. 2 men have been white, one and 2 have been lighter skinned, but they've not been white. So, and their families have been racist towards me. So, you know, I've always had that feeling of I need to be approved of, like a fight. Like I'm the one who's inherently wrong, inherently disgusting. So I need to somehow fight to prove that I'm lovable by these lighter skinned people who already, yeah, they fancy me because they fetishize and objectify me, but they don't actually give a fuck about who I am or like my background, anything like that. You know, they've racialized me already. And so like, I totally hear you with that. And it's been coming out of my last relationship, which was my only relationship with a British white guy, and probably my last one, let's not lie, because of the work that still needs to be done on a huge scale. I'm horrified. I'm horrified at what I tolerated and put up with in terms of just the self-hatred. And I hear that with Black men. I see it with all people of color, really, in different ways. But I really resonate with what you were saying. It's because you hate your own skin color because you've been taught to, not because it's our natural way of being. I just want to make that clear. We're not born hating our skin color. We are made to hate our skin color, and that's a deliberate manipulation. It's an evil, cruel manipulation. And so you play into that, and then you're like, what the fuck was I doing? And then it's like reclamation work 24/7, like you know, looking in the mirror, like affirmations, like looking at other people who are Asian or Black and just being like, yes, drinking it in, you know.
100%, you have to, because it's like it happens, the abuse happens on every level. It's like every level. And then it's like, you know, it's like, and for me, it's like, you know, I see some Black men, and I'm going to keep it 1,000. I see some Black men that I know personally. Okay. And it's like, and then you look at the people who they're with, and again, this is no judgment or criticism. It's just an observation. You look at who they're with, and it's like, you don't think there's any work, you don't think there's anything to unpack there? Like nothing to unpack there. Like you are only with white women. Like you're only with white women as a Black man. Do you think that is a natural state of being? Like, do you think that's your natural African state of being? Only being attracted to white women or white people, you know, maybe you're, you know, whether it's, you know, whoever it is. You think that's your natural state of being? You think there's nothing to unpack? You think there's no trauma there? You think there's no abuse there? And it's just like, sometimes it's, look, I'm not trying to, like, I don't want to speak, you know, I'm not telling people who to date and who to whatever. No, but go into things knowing what's going on, you know, be aware of what's going on and the ways in which you're projecting and the ways in which you're being fetishized, the ways in which, you know, you're being abused, you know, even in your own relationships. And so, again, that's one of the things I see, particularly with, you know, again, we see with many Black and brown people. But when I see it with, you know, I see it a lot with Black men, and it's just, it honestly, it breaks my heart, because I'm just like, wow, you think so, in reality, and again, you can be all the bravado you want in the world, but in reality, you think so low of yourself that you think this is the best for you. And it's just like, it's sad. It's sad.
Yeah. I mean, like, speaking from experience, it really is like that. It's like that. It's like literally for years, like I only really had crushes on white people. I absolutely was repulsed by South Asian men. I have to be honest. And now I'm horrified by that. But it was the internalized racism. It was so horrific within me. It was like, oh, if someone asked me, like, would you date a South Asian guy? I went on a couple of dates. I never had a long-term serious relationship with them, because I was like, oh, because I felt like that about myself. When I thought about myself, I was like, oh. So it was like, why would I want to be with a man that reflects who I am? This is how fucked. We just have 100%. To take a moment of like appreciation for how fucked it is. And I have to say fucked, because I if I could use a stronger word, I would, but I can't think of any right now. It's fucked. And like it is manipulation, it's mind control, it is poison. We drank the fucking Kool-Aid. We were given it in gallons. I mean, if you think about, I was thinking the other day, you know, I never had a teacher of color. I never had a teacher of color. I didn't have a therapist of color. So, you know, when you're growing up, like, I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but for me, when I was growing up, like everyone who told me anything from a place of authority in these institutions was white. Can you imagine the poison that, like, not that they're poisonous as human beings, but the systems and structures that are poisonous that whiteness has, you know, like just absorbed, and then it gets filtered down, and the kind of what we must have been taught as Black and brown kids from these white people that had their own racial biases. Because let's face it, had they done all the work? No, obviously not. They still haven't. And then it's like, then we get taught through this lens and this energy, and it's just like, I was just thinking, like, what have I absorbed without question from these people that was not reflective of my culture in any way? It was completely minimizing of my culture. It was completely, no one ever addressed like me that I was Indian. It was completely minimizing. I was treated like a ghost in the room. No one touched on the fact I was different. It was like, no, you're one of us. Like, that was the quick response. Like, you know, oh no, you're one of us, as if that was the right thing to say and to do. Like, oh no, like, we know there's something wrong with you, but like, you're one of us, like, don't worry. And I'm a really nice person for saying that you're one of us. You know, it's like, it's just completely crazy. And so, like, reclaiming our ancestry is almost about stripping away and releasing things as it is about bringing things into our world. It's actually like really going deep and like looking at the subtleties of how we've been poisoned, and then like literally drinking the anti-venom, you know, which hurts. It's painful and it's going to hurt. If someone like injects you with anti-venom, it's going to sting, you know, and that's what we're going through in a way, as well as the joy. It's the sting and the grief and the horror as well.
100%. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, it's tough. It's tough, you know, and like you said, it really is a poison, and it has like infected our communities in such a big way, in the whole world, you know, but that's the work for us to do. And so for those who are listening, what are some practical ways? You know, you've mentioned one already in terms of like looking at, you know, intentionally looking at people who look like you and who have your features on a more consistent basis. But what are some other practical ways that people can reclaim their ancestry, but also if we zoom in a bit more on as well, like divesting from the ideologies of how we look?
So I feel like kind of deliberately going to places where there are people that look like you. And in England, that's not too hard. I mean, now I live in Wembley, and you know, I walk down the street and there's black and brown people everywhere, and unconsciously, subconsciously, that is rewiring my system and calming my nervous system down. So I feel like if you can't do that, you know, just surround yourself with pictures of people who look like you. Bring out your childhood pictures as well. I feel like that's really important. Talk to them. Talk to your inner child if you feel comfortable doing so. Literally look at that picture and talk to your inner child, because that's when the poison started to be ingested. That's when your little self, you know, started to drink that poison from whiteness. So talk to that child, tell them that they're beautiful, tell them that they're lovely and handsome. Look in the mirror, do the mirror work. Everyone has a mirror, I'm guessing, and just literally look in the mirror. And you know, at first when I started doing this, there were parts of me that I was like, oh, I don't really want it, I don't like it. But it's just because it's not normalized. The more you do it, the more normal it becomes. And things like, for example, I have like hair on my arms now. It was a very deliberate attempt to stop epilating. And at first, when I stopped epilating and pulling these hairs out, I was like, oh. And then I thought, no, if I just keep them there, I'll normalize it being there, and then I won't feel like that anymore. It's about normalizing it. It's a brain thing. It really is about like rewiring your neural connections, and surround yourself. I mean, okay, I have divested from whiteness. I'm not going to lie. There's very few white people in my life. That's not to say that that's permanent, but they just need to be doing a certain level of work. And at the moment, I don't see that in the people that I was in contact with, and that's the truth. So for me, like just talking to black and brown people instead of exclusively white people, you know, that for me has been like incredibly healing as well. And then in terms of like wider than just, you know, looks, I would say, you know, utilize YouTube, utilize libraries, and just anything that you're curious about, like food, music, not costume, but like clothing. You know, I follow things on Instagram, like accounts where it's just Indian fashion. saris and styles like that, and I'll follow food accounts as well. I'll listen to Indian music. And also, if you are in contact with your family, I'm not so much with most of them, but if you are, ask them, spend time with them, ask them about their stories and how they grew up, and like watch and observe their habits and what they do culturally, because all of that is really prominent, and it's going to heal you. It's going to heal you from the inside out. And the more you do it, the more you will find yourself naturally leaning into that. So yeah.
Definitely. So well said. So beautiful. If anyone has any questions for us, please put them in the chat, or I believe there's a question box as well. But if there's anything else you want to share, Maya, I feel like I don't know, there's kind of a natural kind of conclusion that's happening that I'm feeling on this end. But if there's anything you want to add, or any other threads you want to pull out,
yeah,
feel free
sure.
to do that. And I'm happy to go down the rabbit hole with you.
Thank you. No, I mean, there's always more. So for example, for me with spirituality, with Hindu spirituality, and then this applies for anyone who is looking to reconnect with their ancestry and their spiritual ancestry. I found that there was a gap in my knowledge around, so I see like Hindu gods, but I don't know the story of them. And, that there was a massive gap in my education, obviously, because whiteness came in. I had a white stepmom, like it was all about whiteness and Christianity. So I have now had to make a conscious effort to buy books or find books that tell me the story. So I recently bought the Ramayana, a retelling of the Ramayana, which is a series of like mythological stories, like based in Hindu spirituality. And I am going to read it just to understand why we even do the things that we do, because so much of Hindu culture, like day-to-day practices, actually stem from like this mythology and these stories from Hindu books. And when I say mythology, I'm not actually saying it didn't happen. I just mean, I mean stories, whether they happened or not in actual reality, or whether they were more like parables to teach us something. It doesn't matter. They're relevant and they're valuable. And like the way that we dress and, things like this, that has a deeper meaning. So let's go into this now. So part of my ancestral reclamation was to get Trajba, which is Gujarati tattoos from tribes. Oh, I don't think you can see. Yeah. And so I deliberately decided to reclaim that part of our kind of heritage, because my grandmas, when I was growing up, they had little dots on them, and I used to ask them, like, what is that? And then they said, we got tattooed when we were younger. So I started looking into that, and I was like, I really want something permanently on me that reminds me every single day of who I am, that I can't even like get rid of, And then I also got my nose pierced because I hated my nose for years. And so to get a piercing was a deliberate attempt to go, look at my nose. And also like Indian people, we pierce our noses. So there were all of these little things that I started to do. And then like the books, now I live in Wembley, I go and eat Indian food. All of these things are just so nourishing. And then you're like, this is like, Indian food to me personally is like obviously better than like English food. And so I'm like, I was like not wanting to claim that, like, what the hell? Like I'm actually sad that I lost some years, like not steeping myself in it more, because it's like the best thing ever. And it's like, relearning to love those parts of yourself. I mean, I'm wearing this like chandler today, and I remember when I used to get forced to go to Indian weddings and have to wear this and have to wear the saris, and I was ashamed. I was embarrassed. Like I didn't even want to cross the road to get to the wedding. I didn't even want to walk into the wedding, even though everyone else was dressed like me. I felt ashamed even in front of them. I was so ashamed of like everything about myself. And now I'm like, no, if there was an opportunity to wear an Indian outfit, like I'll do it, because it's beautiful. And so same with like, African tribal ancestry and all of those things. It's like, it's so beautiful and so rich. And, you know, releasing the shame around that by embracing the things that do appeal to you. I think it's, if you're trying to force yourself to like do everything at once, there are naturally going to be things that don't appeal to you, because that's a human thing anyway. So go towards what you naturally gravitate towards. Like if it's food, great. If it's fashion, great. If it's spirituality, great. Or just take what works for you. I would say that's the best way to do it. Like go with what you love. Don't do it out of a sense of duty, because I feel like that never goes anywhere good. Like forcing yourself to do anything. Like even if you're like, actually, I don't give a shit about my cultural ancestral heritage. Fine, leave it. Come back to it when you do, because I guarantee at some point you will be curious. And if not, you know, don't force yourself. Yeah. But I think most people in their lives, when they have been poisoned by toxic whiteness, that's what happens. And I want to talk about whiteness for a second, because I don't want to exclude white people completely from this conversation. White people have an ancestral heritage that is incredibly powerful, incredibly strong. And I think if more white people were anchored in that, we would have a much healthier world. And then cultural appropriation and power dynamics and racism wouldn't actually happen, because white people would be anchored in a sense of power and rootedness in who they really are. I mean, Christianity came along and like completely usurped like Celtic and pagan traditions, which was a deliberate attempt. And so, you know, white people have a lot of trauma, religious and spiritual trauma, because of what happened. So I would say for white people, you know, this is just as important. Literally just as important. If we're going to heal this whole colonial racism situation, it is imperative that white people do their work, and they do it now. Like no time too soon. And like, I will go as far as to say, I believe that is a duty of white people. Like, and I know a few minutes ago I said it of people of color. It's not necessarily a duty. I do feel like for white people, because they are the ones who have the power and they are still exerting that power over us, I do feel like it's a moral obligation and a duty. And if you're tuning into a conversation like this, I'm guessing you're already doing the work, because I don't know why you'd be here otherwise, like especially tuning into like a Black and brown person having this conversation. But like, you know, please do the work, because you have a beautiful ancestry. Like it is beautiful. There is so much to be found in Celtic and pagan traditions and food, and you know, because I've looked into it a little bit too, just because it's just so interesting. There is so much like witchcraft, and it's undeniably rich. You know, there is something for you there, which is better than what's been happening. You know, you were poisoned too. Like when Christianity came in the patriarchal sense, and you know, you were poisoned as well as white people. We've all drank the Kool-Aid. You know, this is not who we really are. So like, let's just get back to the roots of that. So yeah.
I love it. I mean, you're one of my favorite people to listen to. So I'm just like here. I know we're like both on the call, but I'm just here like listening and just drinking everything you're saying. And it's like, yeah, look, it's for white people as well. Like, and I completely agree with everything you've said, Maya, and I echo everything you've said. There is such a beautiful and rich Celtic and pagan ancestry. And guess what, people? It's free from the exploitation and abuse of Black and brown people, you know? And part of the reclamation work is to reclaim your identity as a white person outside of abusing Black and brown people for your own gain. Like you have to, like, that is part of healing, to know yourself outside of the systems of oppression.
Yeah.
And without that work, you will never know yourself as a white person outside of oppression. Because oppression it's become synonymous with whiteness.
Yeah.
To know yourself outside of patriarchy, outside of white supremacy and other systems of oppression. And that's for all of us to do, by the way.
Yeah.
All of us. My prayer and intention for all of us is that we all know ourselves and our souls outside of systems of oppression and outside of patriarchy and all of it. That, to me, that's what it means to be saved. Like, you know, growing up in church, people talked about salvation and being saved. That's what it means for me to be saved.
Yeah.
I've reclaimed my power to define what being saved is and what salvation is for me. And part of being saved for me is to know myself and my soul outside of systems of oppression.
Yeah.
And so if we zoom in on white people, that's what's on offer for you. To know your true self, to know your soul, And I'm telling you, when, you know, and, you know, when I have a friend of mine, you know, who I was hanging out with not too long ago, who's white Jewish, but is, you know, has Celtic ancestry or engages with Celtic ancestry. And one night we were around his, and he just put on some Celtic music, you know, and he was like, I just want to play this for you. And I was like, yeah, go for it. And I'm telling you, the way it moved me, honestly, the same way that gospel music moved me, the same way that African music moved me, and it moved me. I was like, this is so beautiful. This is so rich. Reclaim this. Reclaim this. And if more white people did, you wouldn't have to go appropriating everything else and like looking for spirituality all in the Far East and all in the... You got it right here. You got it right here at home. You got it right here at home. Reclaim it. And I want that for you. For every white person, I want that for you. And I declare and decree that for you. If that's what you want and you're committed to that, I want that for you and I claim that for you. Because like Maya said, we're all going to be better off if you start reconnecting. We're all going to be better off. So please reconnect.
Absolutely. And imagine what it does to a person's soul that their feeling of self-worth is based on the oppression of others. That's not real. That's not real freedom, happiness, joy. You'll only have to do that work eventually. You're not going to get away lightly with that. So might as well do it now, you know? And like you said, all of us, like as a man, you're doing the work of seeing how your power has been from oppressing women or, other genders. And so it's like, we all have to do that work. And I have to look at anti-blackness that's been put into me, you know, and so an anti-Indianness is put into me where I've like, put down other Indian people as well and like seen them as lower, you know. It's like there's so much work to be done, and that's the thing, like when it's like we've drank the poison and we are like throwing it up now, it's coming out, and it's not always going to be comfortable because it's a mirror. Like you have to look in the mirror and really see clearly and take accountability for what we have been part of. And so not only as the oppressor, but as the oppressed, you know, like me looking at this relationship, my previous one with this white guy, like it's been really painful because I've been like, what must I have thought of myself that I tolerated certain behaviors from him that were so racialized and misogynistic that I felt so low about myself. I hated myself so much that I felt that's what I deserved. And that is painful. But we have to look at that, because if we don't, we're just going to keep repeating. And like you said earlier, it's like when someone is exclusively, if a person of color is only exclusively dating white people, or if a white person is only exclusively dating people of color and not doing the work, you have to look at its patterns. It's a pattern. It's not like, you know, you date a bunch of people of color as a person of color and then there's one white person in there or two. We're talking about when it's like this consistent pattern where you will not look at someone else of color as a potential partner. There is something there as a mirror for you. You have to look deeply and clearly at the mirror. You might not like what you see, but that doesn't mean that it's always going to be that way. Once you have looked at the issue, dealt with it, felt the pain of it, and healed it, like your type will change, because you will look at yourself with more self-worth. And then you will look at the world as a reflection of who you feel you are. And you will literally vibrate higher. You know, I don't mean to sound love and light, but I do think there is like that feeling of like vibrate higher. But like there is something in that. You know, we are releasing dense energies like self-hatred. And yeah, how can we reclaim until we've made a space to bring in those fruitful energies? But we need to make space by releasing the knots and the denser energies that have been piled onto us, that are in our like aura and energetic field. So yeah,
100%. It's all about releasing yourself from projections and distortions. And so Maya's completely right. Your attractions will start to change. The attractions that are distorted will start to change. It's not like, oh, you know, you're gay and then you start like, this isn't some like pray the gay. This is some weird. No, it's like, it's the part where there are distortions. Being, you know, for instance, being a black man and only being, you know, attracted to white women or another group of women that isn't your own. There is work to do there. Like Maya said, there is reflections to be had there is a distortion there. There's a distortion. And again, part of being saved, for me, being saved is not just to know my soul apart from oppression, but to be free from projections and distortions. And so you don't want to live in distortions. And so again, it's up for us all to look at. And I can tell you, your attractions will begin to change. Literally, they will begin to change. Even what you think about, like even if you're masturbating and what you think about when you masturbate, that will begin to change. All of it will begin to change. You know, like literally how you view people, the whole thing will begin to change. You know, and that's very real, very, very real.
Yeah, and we're talking not just about racialized distortions, but patriarchal distortions as well.
Yeah.
You know, because the two have become so intertwined, and colonialism for me was the patriarchy. I mean, it was mainly carried out by men. It was a very like masculine dominated or toxic masculine dominated situation. It's not like millions of women went and, you know, like killed other people, you know, like it's mainly the masculine energy that was destructive and dominating. And, you know, then obviously women were part of that. Like women have been like absolutely, you know, they've carried racism and colonialism, they still do. But like, there is something about the tight knot of energy that was caused by the patriarchy within colonialism. It's power over. And I feel like that's for men watching, like even as men of color, like, you know, it's like that is still in you. Yeah. Because not because you're a bad person, but you were born into, like, a fish doesn't know it's in water. You know what I mean? It's like we're swimming in it. You don't know until you come out of it and you get a breather and you're like, oh my God, like, what the fuck have I been doing? So it's like, there's a lot of work to be done, but there is also joy, you know, when you do figure out those things. So I don't want to be like, it's all hard. It's not. Like the joy of the joy of me wearing this bindi right now, like that's joy. I spent years like hating this kind of stuff or feeling like I couldn't wear it. And so like even wearing this is like this huge significant joy for me to be showing myself to you guys like this.
Definitely. And you know, and what you said about, men of color, you know, like all of us, you know, white men of color, whatever, but particularly men of color, you know, again, that patriarchal work is so ingrained in us. And it's it is so closely connected and intertwined with white supremacy, you know. Again, it's like even the behaviors, like even if we zoom in and we just look at colorism, I mean, where do you think that's coming from? So if you're a person of color out there, if you're a man of color out there and you are prioritizing white women above your own community's women, I mean, you're just playing out white supremacy. And so again, when I see that particularly within the Black community, you got all these Black men, it's like, brother, you only date light-skinned women or white women or women outside of your community. And then you're talking about Black Lives Matter. It's like, you are literally, the white man is in you. Like you are just enacting, you are enacting, you are perpetuating the white man, like, you know, the toxic white man. And so it's like, again, it's like, we got to be real with what's going on here. And that gender work, I'm telling you, that's an unraveling and unbecoming like no other. Honestly, I can't even fully even speak about it because I'm in the midst of it. But like, it's an unraveling, like, you know, like I can't even, because like I still like need to like continue the process, and it's a lot. It's a lot. And you got to sit with a lot. Like I tell Maya, like every time I speak to her, I'm like, Maya, I need to go into the middle of the woods. I have to retreat. Like that's just where I'm at. Cause I'm like, I literally have to go and retreat and like go process this stuff, like, which I'm planning on doing. But it's all for us to do. And particularly, again, I see this so much in men of color, like whether it be Black or South Asian men, particularly, do not prioritize, honor, and uplift white women above your own women. Do not do it. Do not do it. One of the reasons why our communities are in the situations that they're in, largely speaking, is because we aren't honoring, protecting women full stop across the board. But particularly when we zoom in on our particular communities, women, there's no way that you're going to see the progress of the community while you're still degrading and oppressing your women, like your community's women. There's no way. You will not see the progression or the healing that you're after. So you cannot on one hand be like, I'm fighting for justice, I'm fighting for truth, I'm fighting for this, and then you're oppressing and just enacting and propagating patriarchy. It does not work like that. And I want to say that to every man out there, it does not work like that. Okay? So I don't care how far along you are in your race work, I don't care how far along you are in whatever work you're doing. without the patriarchal work and the unraveling and the dismantling and the combustion of that work within you, I'm telling you, you ain't getting very far. You're not getting very far. And it's all for naught. And it's all for naught, because all it's going to do is bring you right back to the patriarchy work. All it's going to do. You can do climate change out the yin yang. You can do whatever you want to do, whatever you want to do. I don't care. I don't care. It's all going to bring you back to this work.
Yeah.
All of it is.
Well, no one's free till we're all free. And that's the thing. It starts with, like, I know people have said it, but it starts with women and children. And I want to also add into that, like, other genders who have been oppressed, you know, people on the gender spectrum that don't identify as cis male, cis het male, you know, it's like, if you're doing this work, and you're not including the people that the work has oppressed, or that you have oppressed to even get there, well, you're only going to get back to the same point anyway, because they're still going to be oppressed at the end of the day. You could save the environment. You're still going to be dealing with these oppressed people. We are so interlinked. I think what we're realizing now is how interconnected we are, and you can't escape. You can't escape the shadow. You cannot escape. You know, and also when you oppress the feminine, you oppress half of yourself. You
100%.
literally oppress half of yourself. Like, this is like within you, the feminine within you, the child within you. So it's like, you know, we're not going to get anywhere. We're just going to run around in circles. And I also, when you mentioned about running into the forest, I just wanted to add, before I forget, a huge part of ancestral reclamation work is working with nature, because that's what our ancestors used to do. But also, I know for me, I've healed from racism through Mother Nature, because being in England, okay, you walk down the street, majority of places, and there's white people who have historically and still oppress us, right? But when you go into nature, even if it, especially if it's in England, actually, you realize that nature doesn't have a prejudice against you. It loves you. It's not abusing you. It is a safe place to go and feel love, and to feel at home, and to feel the land's love for you, because it's actually about working with the land. Reclamation work, ancestral reclamation work, is about working with the land, because we are products of the land. We come from the land, where we go back to the land, whether we're cremated, buried, whatever. Even if it's a sky burial, eventually we go back to the land. So, like, it really is about working with land. So if you have a safe space that you can go to, even if it's a small clearing with like some trees, some grass, whatever, flowers, please do, because animals as well, animals are super important. They're not prejudiced or biased. They don't look at race. They don't even, like, that's not even a thing, you know? And so it's like, that is one of the most healing things you can do to reclaim your ancestry. And I found that I have a better relationship with England because I've gone to the land. I haven't necessarily gone to the people. I did, and they disappointed me at that time, and that's a whole other story. But I did go to the land, and I spoke to the land, and I heard the energy of the land and the nurturance of the land. I mean, the land has fed me since I was born. This land loves me, you know, and the land wants justice. You know, whether the people know it or not, it's the land that's bringing up a lot of this energy, you know, like we see it now in the royal family and the government. Like, the land is speaking. The land wants justice. The land knows what's happened and what its people has done. So for me, I felt very welcomed and nourished by Mother England when I went into the forest. And I do it every day. Like, literally, if I wasn't on this call, I'd be in the forest. Like, I go there like every day. That's how I heal. I put my hand on the trees, you know, and I talk to Mother Earth, and I listen to the birds. It's so important. So important.
It's the land reclamation work, and things changed for me. It was a couple of years ago, maybe a few years ago, where things changed for me when I started actually connecting with the land of England, not England as a nation, but the land that this nation is on, it dwells on. And that's when things started shifting for me as well, is actually knowing Mother England, you know, like actually knowing that this land, like you said, this land has birthed me, fed me, housed me. Like, this land loves me, you know, this land loves us all. Any land you're on, this land loves us. We've got about 20 seconds before this Are you feeling to go on to a part two, or do you want to round things out?
No, I think let's round things out. Thank you, everyone,
Perfect.
for being here. And we'll see you next time.
We'll see you next time. Maya, always good speaking with you. Everyone, lots of love. Take care of yourself, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
See you all.